The newest Helldivers 2 Warbond, Viper Commandos, is here. I was very excited for this thing to drop. Out of all of the Warbond reveals to date, this one had me the most pumped. Even though there were less weapons than the other Warbonds, I didn't mind because the direction here was actually a good one. It seems like Arrowhead truly sat down and committed to making everything a jungle theme. I said all of these things back in my video which covered the Warbond before it came out. In case you haven't seen that video, I basically said that I really loved the thematic, and the fact that they finally added vehicle skins, a new armor passive, and a new grenade type was a worthwhile trade-off for not getting the usual 4 weapons we've come to expect. But I did make sure to mention that this Warbond could very well release and fall flat on its face. Despite whatever direction they go thematically or new unique item they throw in here, the truth is that a Warbond is only as valuable as it is useful in-game. Even if you fall in love with the vehicle skins or new armor sets, you'll end up disappointed if the in-game gear doesn't deliver. And since there are only 2 weapons and 2 armor sets compared to the usual 4 weapons and 3 armor sets, there is a lot less here, meaning that if even 1 or just 2 items miss the mark, the entire Warbond could crumble around it. So as someone who went into this Warbond with the highest possible levels of hype, did it actually deliver? Well, I'm going to try and answer that question by going through each and every item and giving you some tips and tricks along the way, but ultimately giving you a rating out of 10 and my recommendation if Viper Commandos is worth your hard-earned super credits, or $10. So with that being said, my name is Easy, and let's dive right into Helldivers 2's newest Warbond, Viper Commandos. We're going to quickly begin by speedrunning through the cosmetics in this Warbond. Again, I don't think I'll be spending too much time here because this stuff is more subjective than anything else and cannot be tested in-game. But for $10, you're going to get 300 super credits, 2 player banners, 2 capes, 2 helmets, 2 victory poses, 1 emote, 1 player title, and 3 vehicle patterns. Of course, this is on top of the 2 weapons, 2 armor passives, throwable, and booster. Personally, again, I really love the theme of this Warbond. It can feel a little out of place when diving onto a snow planet with jungle camos, but I don't really care about that too much. The thing a lot of people do care about though is that the vehicle camos and player title have taken the place of 2 weapons and 1 full armor set. At face value, you are trading in-game gear for cosmetics. Some people have taken issue with that ever since the Warbond got revealed. Personally, I was fine with it, but if you prefer actual content over cosmetics, then this Warbond may not be for you. But enough with the cosmetics, let's get to our first weapon. The AR-23A Liberator Carbine. This is a carbine variant of the standard issue Liberator. The one and only difference in stats is that the carbine has a much higher fire rate and more recoil than the standard Liberator. Outside of raw stats, they do have different scopes. The standard Liberator features a 25-meter adjustable scope, whereas the carbine has a simple red dot sight. Everything about the weapon, from its carbine name to its small and speedy design, screams that this thing was made for close-range combat, and it definitely was. Now, I'll be completely honest, when I first used this guy, I was extremely disappointed. My first game or two, I sat there thinking, man, this thing totally blows. It made no sense to me that a weapon with such a high fire rate had the same magazine size as the standard Liberator. During my first match, I was thinking its mag size is too small to be a horde clear weapon, but its fire rate is too high to be a precision rifle, and its damage is too low to burst down medium tier units. Now, those concerns are still very valid and true, but the more I used the carbine, the more I found myself getting more and more comfortable with it. The high fire rate had made me think it was supposed to be a spray and pray type of weapon like the Stalwart, but obviously I was wrong. I found that firing in bursts was the way to go. The lowest tier of units, like Automaton Troopers, Terminid Scavengers, Pouncers, and Bile Spitters, will drop dead in just 1 to 4 bullets, so you are much better at just firing it like it's a 3-round burst weapon, or even tap firing to conserve ammo. And jump up enemy tiers a little bit to things like Warriors and Hunters, you'll still want to go the burst fire route, but do so in longer bursts. Instead of 3 bullets, shoot upwards of 8, 9, or even 10 at a time. Any longer, and you're probably just wasting ammo. Unfortunately, this is kind of where the carbine's effectiveness takes a drop off a cliff. Once you start fighting enemies like Nursing Spewers, Hive Guards, Brood Commanders, and Berserkers, you will find that you kind of just want to throw the carbine on the ground and try your luck with your secondary. Just remember what it was like to fight these enemies with a normal Liberator. These types of enemies are straight up bullet sponges for that weapon. And of course, the carbine struggles with the same thing, except with the added fact that with a much higher fire rate, it comes with more recoil. It could be a skill issue on my end, but unless you are within 5 to 8 meters of them, firing full auto means you aren't very accurate just due to the amount of recoil on the gun. So you're going to have bullets not hitting their weak spot or just missing altogether. Sure, you could get closer, and at that point, having such a high fire rate weapon means these enemies go down quickly, but that still doesn't excuse the fact that you are blowing through ammo at alarmingly high rates. And jumping up another enemy tier past that, well, it's not even worth talking about, because this weapon cannot damage anything with an armor value over 2, so its effectiveness ends at low to medium tier units, and I'd argue it's not even effective with those. My first couple of matches, I found myself running out of ammo stupidly fast, but once I started learning how to control the weapon and adopting some burst fire techniques, I did hang on to ammo much longer. However, this weapon falls into a bit of a no man's land for me. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's particularly great at anything specific. Honestly, the best thing it can do is take down large amounts of low tier units swarming you. I did feel significantly less threatened by hunters and even stalkers, which is nice, but at that point, why not take a shotgun, which will have far better ammo economy? It's in a really weird spot of having too high of a fire rate, but too little ammo to do the things you really want to do with a weapon with that high of a fire rate, which is to spray down everything in your path. I also figured I'd throw this in here, but it's definitely far better against bugs than it is against bots. I've tried both, of course, and against bots, there just isn't enough need for a close range weapon for clearing low tier enemies. When you come face to face with a Devastator, the weapon just fires way too fast to consistently hit the head, even when tap firing or burst firing. In the end, my opinion on this weapon is that you can pass on it and not miss out on much. It's not unique and it's not great. There are far better assault rifle alternatives in the game. Sure, it looks cool, and I'd say it might be a little above average, but that's being generous. In most situations, you'll find yourself wishing you brought a different weapon, and quite honestly, I couldn't wait to be done getting footage with this thing so I could use something else. Now we're onto the secondary weapon, the SG-22 Bushwhacker. This is Helldivers 2's first ever shotgun secondary, which fires 10 gauge buckshot and comes equipped with a triple barrel alongside 2 firing modes. It is not only very unique, but it is exactly what I hope for from a secondary weapon in shooters. Something that can get you out of a sticky situation when you need it. The Bushwhacker can do that and a lot more. With a very generous amount of ammo at 30 rounds, you have the ability to not only save this in your back pocket for a get out of jail free card, but you can genuinely use this thing as one of your main weapons. Honestly, I found myself putting away the Liberator carbine and just using the Bushwhacker. To help you further understand the power in the Bushwhacker, remember that this weapon utilizes 10 gauge buckshot, which is the exact ammo type that the Punisher uses. Coincidentally, both the Bushwhacker and Punisher both fire 9 pellets per shot. So that means with each shot of the Bushwhacker, you have the possibility of dealing the same amount of damage as the Punisher does. Plus, they also have the same stagger force. Statistically, the Bushwhacker actually has far more DPS than the Punisher because the Bushwhacker can fire all 3 of its shots at the same time. If all of your pellets hit in a triple shot, you'll be dealing upwards of 1200 damage. Now, it is a little more difficult for your pellets to hit because the spread seems to be a lot bigger, but if you can get close enough, you can completely take the head off a Brood Commander with just 1 shot. And I don't want to sit here and compare this weapon to the Punisher all day, but I hoped that helped make my point. By many accounts, you've got a miniature version of a primary weapon in your pocket. Considering it's a shotgun, I would say that it's better against bugs than it is bots, but really, I actually kind of enjoyed it a lot on the automaton front. It very easily scraps the low tier automaton units, even at a bit of a range, but if you can get close enough, it can actually take down Devastators at really fast speeds. Just barrel stuff their head and they will go right down. Despite being a secondary, the Bushwhacker is definitely the highlight of this Warbond, at least in my opinion. Obviously, it doesn't bring as much versatility as something like the grenade pistol, but in my book, this is an S-tier secondary. It is not only one of the best weapons for bailing yourself out of a sticky situation, but you can feel confident pulling this thing out to take on a horde of enemies by itself. 10 out of 10, wood shotgun again. Now that the 2 weapons are out of the way, let's talk a bit about the throwing knife, which was one of the things I was most excited for when I saw the trailer for Viper Commandos. The K2 throwing knife has 8 charges that can be bumped up to 10 with the engineering kit passive. It has 250 base damage, 100 durable damage, 35 stagger force, and 3 armor penetration. Having 250 damage, it can one-shot small bugs and bots, including hunters if you hit them in the right spot. It can also one-shot Devastators if you hit them in the head, but considering the knives definitely don't go where your crosshair is, it takes about 5 shots to the body to fully kill them. Warriors can go down in 1 headshot and Hive Guards in 2. Outside of that, the real highlight in my opinion is that the throwing knives can actually kill both Spewer variants in 2 headshots, and can fully kill a charger with 4 knives to the leg. But don't get too excited here because I have to assume that it being able to penetrate charger leg armor is a bug. The throwing knife only has 3 armor penetration and charger has 5 armor on its legs, so yeah, it doesn't make much sense at all. But maybe it is a design choice. I highly doubt it though, so enjoy being able to do this while you can. Outside of those enemies, you can actually deal damage to automaton heat sinks, but it does so little damage you are better off just shooting it. Also, you cannot melee with the throwing knife, which is a huge letdown. Granted, there was never confirmation or anything from Arrowhead that made anyone think that you could melee with the knife, but I think a lot of people, including myself, hoped that since the armor passive was a melee buff, that it would be perfect if you could stab things with the knife. Alas, we were wrong, so we are feeling a little disappointed on that end. However, not being able to melee isn't the only reason the throwing knife has me feeling that way. The fact you can't pick them up and there's only 8 charges makes it really hard for anyone to want to equip the knife over a real grenade. Look at it this way, one single incendiary grenade can kill upwards of 10 plus enemies, usually more, every time you throw it, and you have 4 charges. But the throwing knife, at best, can only kill 1 enemy, and considering it has a really wonky aiming system, and your character doesn't throw it very far, means that the throwing knife just isn't consistent, and if it actually was, it'd only kill 1 enemy at most. Sure, since we're able to kill charges with just 4 knives, I'd say yeah, it's probably worth equipping in its current state, but again, I don't think that is intentional, and outside of that, you will get far more value from any other grenade in the game. Having double the capacity of normal grenades just isn't enough in my opinion. The best part about the throwing knife is that it very much fits into this jungle theme and is a unique item, so kudos are given there. However, it doesn't live up to the hype in-game. I think the easiest possible buff they could give this thing is to make it a little stronger when hitting enemy weak spots, or they can make it so that you can pick up the knives. That would definitely be the most impactful, but I'm sure that is far more difficult to implement than number tweaks. Despite being very cool, I don't think you are missing out on much if you didn't own the K2 throwing knife. Finally, we are out of the weapons and onto the booster. This will probably be quick because it's fairly straightforward, but experimental infusion makes it so that your stims will give you increased movement speed and reduced damage for a short time. This booster is actually one of the best premium Warbond boosters in the game. It might actually be the best, because all the other good ones in the game come from the free standard Warbond. The move speed boost is very noticeable and not overpowered, but the damage reduction isn't that noticeable honestly. Typically, it is very rare to die under the effects of a stim unless you get one shot, and I haven't been in any situations where this thing could have saved me from a one-shot. I'm not saying that it can't happen, because I'm sure it could, but I just point that out because I haven't noticed it yet. Despite not noticing the damage reduction too much, the move speed boost almost makes it worth its while on its own. We've all stimmed before to gain full stamina. It's genuinely a good way to use stims. So why not gain full stamina and a movement speed increase to boot? It's a really nice booster to have. I can't say with full certainty that it's a top 4 booster or a must-run booster, but I think having this on a team is a really nice quality of life buff for the whole squad. I've played with and without this booster, and while I don't really miss it when it's equipped, I am definitely excited when I see my screen light up yellow and my character run faster. I think this is a W booster overall, and I'm very happy to have it in my arsenal. I'll be equipping it often, and I think you may be a little sad if you don't own this. Granted, it won't be the end of the world because you just need to have a teammate equip it, but it's always nice to own it for yourself. Lastly, we need to talk about the armor sets. They look amazing, but their badass looks aside, we're specifically looking at the armor passive. Peak Physique is a brand new armor passive which made its debut in this Warbond. However, it needs to be noted it is not exclusive to the Warbond. There is one other armor set in the game that appeared in the Superstore with the Peak Physique passive. It's the only medium set with this passive, and I've actually been using that set over the others in the Warbond. The only reason for that is because I think it just looks cooler, but functionally they are the same. Peak Physique increases your melee damage by 50% and improves weapon handling with less drag on weapon movement. Setting aside as much bias as I can for how sick the armor sets look, I think this passive is pretty middle of the road. It's not bad, but it's not good. The melee buff is pretty useless. It does matter where you hit an enemy when you melee them, so you can one melee some of the lowest tier of units, but sometimes it will take 2 melees upwards of 3 to 4 on some automatons. Also, considering that there are no melee weapons in this game, the melee buff is, again, pretty useless. Instead of a melee damage buff, it would have been nice to see maybe a 50% stagger increase to our melee, because it is a real strategy to melee things like hunters to get them off you, but the damage isn't noticeable. It would really be noticeable if they flew back a few extra feet when we hit them in the head. However, that being said, the second passive is definitely the clear highlight of these armor sets. A lot of people are saying it didn't affect their drag on weapon movement or it didn't do enough to help, but I wholeheartedly disagree. I feel like my heavier weapons do actually turn much faster than they did in the past. A weapon like the HMG took forever to catch up if I wanted to spin 180 to shoot something behind me, but now it just feels smoother, faster, cleaner. And I admit, this 100% could just be the placebo effect making me believe the passive is doing something, but I don't think it's that. Ever since this Warbond dropped, I've pretty much exclusively ran these armor sets and I'm really enjoying them. Despite the melee buff being useless, I think the weapon handling more than makes up for it, and you won't be disappointed with these 2 armor sets if you purchase the Warbond. I do want to say again though, don't purchase this Warbond if you just want the the peak physique passive. Just wait a week or so for the PH-56 Jaguar to return to the Superstore and get it for 150 credits. I would recommend doing that if nothing else on the Warbond has won you over so far. Alright, and now we have covered pretty much everything. Of course, we did not go in depth on any cosmetics, and like I said earlier, that is intentional. I'm not here to tell you if something does or does not look cool, that's up to you to decide. What I can, and did tell you though, are my thoughts on if the weapon and gear are worth your money. Just to give a quick recap, I think the Liberator carbine is very average, the Bushwhacker is amazing, the throwing knife is bad, and both the booster and armor passive are great. So really, that kind of splits things down the middle. The carbine and throwing knife are the real lowlights of this Warbond, but since unlocking them, I haven't played a single match without the Bushwhacker or the armor passive equipped, and I think it's going to stay that way for a while. However, do just 3 items out of the entire lot really make the Warbond worth it? Well, that's up to you to decide. If you're buying Warbonds strictly for the impact items we'll have in game, I'd say pass. All you'll be missing out on this Warbond is the Bushwhacker and booster, because again, you can acquire the armor passive from the store. Aside from the carbine and throwing knife, I personally am satisfied with the rest of the gear in the Warbond. However, there is a small feeling of dissatisfaction that I'm left with. There is that want for more. I wish there was another primary weapon. Or 2. Honestly, I'd rather get more weapons and armors than the vehicle camos. I think the value would have just been so much better if we had more actual in-game items to kill enemies with. Despite that, I am still very happy that Arrowhead decided to take a little bit of a different direction with this one. The theme is amazing and every item in the Warbond feels like it belongs. In the future, I hope they can still include vehicle camos, but do so without taking away weapons and armor sets. I totally understand that with a price of $10, there is only so many hours and resources they can reasonably put into something like this without raising the price. But I don't think it's ungrateful to ask for just a little bit more value from this one. Because again, I am left wanting just a little more. Maybe if the throwing knives or carbine ended up better, I'd feel differently. Luckily, Warbonds never expire, so it's not a problem if you want to wait it out and see if they ever buff those 2 items. Because as it stands right now, outside of cosmetics, you're really only getting 3 items you'll ever use. The Bushwhacker, the booster, and the armor. So rated out of 10, I'm going to give Viper Commandos a flat 50% with a 5. I think the stuff that hits really hits, but the stuff that misses is that much more damaging to the Warbond because there are so few items in here to begin with. With a 5 out of 10, my official recommendation is buy this Warbond if you like the cosmetics, but if not, just pass and potentially come back later. However, that's just my opinion, not the end-all be-all. The value of your money can only be determined by you. So if purchasing Viper Commandos will make you happy and you deem it to be worth $10, then it's worth it. Don't let anyone tell you differently. I just hope I could help some of you make a more informed decision before either passing or pulling the trigger. We could always discuss in the comments, so feel free to leave one down below. But the best way to chat with me is joining my Discord. We're building a really cool little community, attempting to be toxic free and just enjoy Helldivers for what it is. That doesn't mean we can't criticize the game or the developers, but we're not going to sit there spamming dead game, bad devs. So feel free to join there. I'm very active. Come say hello. Link is in bio. Drop a sub if you enjoyed this video. Tons of more content is on the way, and I look forward to seeing you around. Thanks for watching. My name is Easy. Take care and have a nice day. See ya!